The notification chimed at 2:17 a.m. while I was elbow-deep in engine grease under my Ford pickup. 38 years old, lying on frozen concrete in my own driveway, wondering why the transmission fluid looked like chocolate milk. The phone buzzed against my ribs where I'd tucked it into my coveralls. Motion detected. Living room. I'd installed that security system exactly 31 days ago. Top-of-the-line motion sensors, infrared cameras, the works. Cost me 3 weeks of overtime at the construction site, but Jenna had been complaining about break-ins in the neighborhood, always worried about someone taking her precious architect awards or that fancy laptop her firm bought her. The app opened with a soft glow, and there he was, a man in a tailored charcoal coat, crossing my living room like he owned the place, confident stride, expensive shoes on my worn carpet. He moved with the casual arrogance of someone who'd been there before, navigating around my coffee table without looking, heading straight for the kitchen. My marriage had been creaking like this old Ford for months. Tonight, they both broke down completely. I rolled out from under the truck and wiped my hands on a shop rag, watching the live feed. The timestamp read 2:18 a.m. Jenna's car wasn't in the driveway, hadn't been since yesterday morning when she left for another client dinner that would run late. Very late, apparently. The man reappeared on camera, now holding 2 wine glasses. Red wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. He moved toward the stairs, and the camera angle shifted to follow him. Well, I'll be damned, I muttered, scrolling through the app's recorded clips. The motion history showed regular entries. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. for the past month, same coat, same confident walk, same route through my house. The system had been dutifully recording everything, creating a neat digital catalog of my wife's Thursday night entertainment. I sat on my truck's tailgate and opened the first recorded clip. There was Jenna's laugh, low and intimate, the way she used to laugh with me before everything became about her career, her stress, her need for space. She appeared in frame wearing the black dress I'd complimented her on last week, the one she said she'd worn to impress potential clients. The audio was crystal clear, high-definition betrayal. "You're sure he won't be back tonight?" the man asked. His voice carried that particular blend of education and entitlement that made my teeth itch. "Ryland's working a double shift on the Morrison project. He'll be there until dawn." Jenna's voice, matter-of-fact, clinical. "Besides, he's been so distracted lately, barely notices anything." I'd been distracted because I'd been working 16-hour days to afford the down payment on the house she wanted, the one with the big windows and the view of the harbor, the one where she was currently entertaining her Thursday night guest. My phone buzzed with another motion alert. I switched back to the live feed and watched them move through my kitchen, her hand resting on his arm like they'd done this dance 100 times. They disappeared up the stairs, heading for the bedroom where I'd painted those walls 3 times to get the exact shade of blue she wanted. The system would keep recording. Every angle, every sound, every betrayal cataloged in neat digital files with timestamps and metadata. I'd built this electronic witness without knowing what it would show me, but now that it had, I wasn't about to waste the evidence. I opened my laptop on the truck's hood and started downloading files. The motion-activated system had been busy, dozens of clips over the past month, each one a small piece of a much larger picture. I copied everything to an encrypted drive, then backed it up to cloud storage with a timestamp and digital signature. 20 years in construction had taught me to document everything. You never knew when you'd need proof. The house stayed quiet except for the occasional motion alert. I ignored those and focused on the older recordings, watching my marriage dissolve in high definition. The man, I still didn't know his name, had been getting more comfortable each week. First visit, he'd stayed an hour. By last Thursday, he hadn't left until almost midnight. Jenna appeared in several clips, always dressed up, always animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm when she talked, looked at him the way she used to look at me when we were dating. before the promotions and the stress and the constant complaints about money. I found myself taking notes like I was preparing a job estimate: times, dates, duration of visits, the wine they drank, always my wine, the food they ate, groceries I'd bought, the casual way they moved through my space, using my home like a hotel. My phone rang, making me jump. Jenna's name on the screen, her photo smiling up at me from our vacation last summer, back when she still smiled at me. "Hey, babe," she said when I answered. Her voice sounded slightly breathless. "How's the truck coming along?" "Still working on it," I said, watching the live feed show an empty living room. They were still upstairs. Transmission's worse than I thought. "You should just take it to a shop. All those late nights in the driveway can't be good for you." "Can't afford a shop right now? Not with the house payment and your student loans." A pause. In the background, I heard water running. "Well, don't stay out there all night. You need sleep." "Where are you again?" "Still at dinner with the Peterson group. You know how these client meetings run. Probably won't be home until very late." I looked at the timestamp on my phone. 2:47 a.m. Either the Peterson group kept vampire hours, or my wife had forgotten how to tell time. "Drive safe," I said. "Always do. Love you." The line went quiet. I stared at the phone, then at the laptop screen showing my empty living room. The system would record her eventual return, probably around dawn, probably after her guest had left through the back door I'd watched him use in previous clips. I closed the laptop and gathered my tools. The truck could wait. I had more important work to do now. 3 days of reviewing footage had given me a complete picture. The man's name was Chad Rains. I'd found that out by running his license plate through a contact at the DMV. Real estate developer, divorced twice, owned a high-rise condo downtown and drove a BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years. He'd been using my house like his personal hotel every Thursday for 6 weeks. The motion sensors had captured everything: his route through the house, the wine he preferred, the way he made himself at home in my kitchen while waiting for Jenna to finish whatever story she was telling about her difficult husband who didn't understand her artistic vision. I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade: saws, sanders, measuring devices that helped me build things that lasted. The laptop screen showed a spreadsheet I'd created, tracking every visit with the precision I usually reserved for construction estimates. Visit 1, 47 minutes. Nervous energy, stayed in the living room. Visit 2, 1 hour 23 minutes. More comfortable, used the kitchen. Visit 3, 2 hours 15 minutes. Complete ownership of the space. By visit 6, he was rearranging my furniture. The garage door rattled as Jenna's car pulled into the driveway. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened a home improvement website, the kind of cover story that would explain why I was researching things on the computer. "Hey," she said, stepping into the garage with a tired smile. "Working late again? Looking at kitchen cabinets? Thought maybe we could finally do that renovation you wanted." Her face lit up, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. "Really? I thought you said we couldn't afford it." "Been picking up extra shifts. Might be able to swing it." She moved closer, looking over my shoulder at the cabinet designs on screen. I could smell her perfume, something new and expensive that I'd never noticed before. Her hand rested on my shoulder, and for a moment, it felt like old times. "These are beautiful," she said, pointing to a set of cherry wood cabinets. "Very elegant. Professional." Professional. Everything with Jenna came back to that word lately. Professional development, professional networking, professional image. I'd started to wonder if she thought our marriage was unprofessional. "What do you think about security?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Maybe upgrade the system while we're renovating?" "Security?" She straightened up, her hand leaving my shoulder. "Why? The neighborhood's perfectly safe." "Just thinking ahead. Property values going up, more expensive stuff in the house. Might be smart to have better cameras." "Cameras seem excessive." Who's going to break into our house? I turned to look at her, studying her face in the blue glow of the laptop screen. You never know. People can surprise you. She held my gaze for a moment, then shrugged. Whatever you think is best. You're the one who handles that stuff. After she went inside, I opened the real estate database and looked up Chad Rain's properties. 3 commercial buildings downtown, the condo, and a vacation house on the coast. His company specialized in luxury development projects and had recently won a contract to renovate the old waterfront district. The same waterfront district where Jenna's architecture firm was consulting on historical preservation requirements. I made another note in my spreadsheet. This wasn't just an affair, it was a business relationship that had gotten personal. Or maybe a personal relationship that had gotten profitable. Either way, it explained how they'd met and why Jenna had been working so many late nights lately. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. J dinner meeting, Peterson Group. I opened the security app and checked the live feed. Empty house, but it was only 6 p.m. Thursday night entertainment didn't usually start until 7:30. I had an hour and a half to prepare. The hardware store was still open, and I needed a few items. Nothing dramatic, just some small modifications to my existing security setup. A couple of additional motion sensors, better audio recording equipment, and a backup power supply in case someone tried to disable the main system. Working on something special? Asked Tom behind the counter. We'd known each other for 15 years, ever since I'd started doing construction work in town. Home security upgrade. Wife's been worried about break-ins. Smart thinking. Can't be too careful these days. People think they can just walk into your house and take whatever they want. That's exactly what I'm worried about, I said, handing him my credit card. The modifications took 45 minutes to install. I added sensors in the kitchen and hallway, upgraded the audio pickups in the living room, and installed a secondary recording system that would back everything up to a remote server in real time. If someone discovered the main cameras, they'd never find the backup system. By 7:15, I was parked 3 blocks away in the lot behind Murphy's Tavern, laptop connected to my phone's hotspot, watching my house through the security feeds. Jenna's car was gone. She'd left at 6:45, right on schedule for her fake dinner meeting. At 7:28, Chad's BMW pulled into my driveway. I watched him walk to my front door with the confidence of someone who belonged there. He had a key. When had Jenna given him a key? The motion sensors tracked his familiar route through my house, but this time I was recording everything in duplicate, with audio enhancement and automatic cloud backup. He moved through my kitchen like he owned it, selecting wine glasses from the cabinet I'd installed last year, choosing a bottle from the rack I'd built to Jenna's specifications. The new audio pickups caught every sound, the cork popping, the wine pouring, the casual whistle he made while waiting. At 7:45, Jenna arrived. "Sorry I'm late," she said, appearing on camera in a red dress I'd never seen before. "Had to stop and get gas." "No problem. I opened the Cabernet." "Perfect. God, what a day. Sometimes I think Rylan doesn't understand how stressful my job is. He thinks architecture is just drawing pretty pictures." They moved to the living room, settling onto the couch I'd bought for our 5th anniversary. Chad handed her a wine glass, and she curled up next to him with the easy familiarity of a long-established routine. "How long do we have tonight?" he asked. "He's working until dawn again. Morrison project is behind schedule, and you know how Rylan gets about deadlines. Obsessive. Good thing he's predictable." Jenna laughed, the sound sharp and bitter through the enhanced audio. Predictable is one word for it. Boring might be more accurate. I sat in the parking lot, watching my wife mock me to her lover in my own living room, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot and impulsive. This was something else, something calculating. They were right about one thing. I was predictable. But they'd made a crucial mistake in their analysis. They thought predictable meant stupid. The files were growing. 2 weeks of enhanced surveillance had given me over 40 hours of footage, all meticulously organized and backed up to multiple secure servers. I'd learned more about my wife's secret life than I'd ever wanted to know, but knowledge was power, and I was going to need all the power I could get. Chad wasn't just any real estate developer. He was connected. City council members, planning commission officials, bank presidents. His Thursday night visits to my house were just the beginning. I'd tracked his schedule and found that Jenna was meeting him other places too. Hotel bars, his condo, job sites where his company was working. The architecture firm where Jenna worked was consulting on 3 of Chad's development projects. Conflict of interest didn't begin to cover what I was looking at. I'd started carrying a small digital recorder everywhere, documenting conversations that might become relevant later. When Jenna complained about work stress, I recorded it. When she mentioned late meetings, I noted the details. When she talked about difficult clients who demanded too much of her time, I made sure to capture every word. "You seem distracted lately," she said over dinner on a Tuesday night. We were eating takeout Chinese food because she'd been too busy to cook, and I'd been too busy gathering evidence to care about groceries. "Just work stuff. The Morrison project is more complicated than we expected. Maybe you should consider a different line of work, something less physical. You're not getting any younger." I looked up from my lo mein, studying her face in the kitchen light. "What would you suggest?" "I don't know. Something that uses your brain instead of just your hands. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Smart enough to figure out when something doesn't add up." She paused with her chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "The Peterson Group project. You've been working on it for 2 months, but I looked them up online. They're based in California. Seems like a lot of local meetings for a West Coast client. They have local representatives. It's complicated." "I'm sure it is." We finished dinner in silence. Afterward, Jenna went upstairs to take a bath, and I uploaded the audio file to my secure server with the file name Dinner Lies Nov 15 MP3. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Mike. "Want to grab a beer tonight? Haven't seen you in weeks." I almost said no. I had surveillance footage to review and phone records to analyze. But Mike worked at the biggest car dealership in town, which meant he knew everyone's business, and everyone's business might include Chad Rains. Murphy's Tavern was busy for a Tuesday night, full of construction workers and dock hands finishing their shifts with beer and complaints about their bosses. Mike was already at the bar when I arrived, nursing a Budweiser and watching the football game on the mounted TV. "You look terrible," he said when I sat down next to him. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." "Seriously, Rye, when's the last time you slept? You've got bags under your eyes that need their own zip codes." I ordered a beer and tried to think of how to steer the conversation where I needed it to go. "Work's been crazy. Plus, Jenna's been stressed about some big project, so the house isn't exactly peaceful." "What kind of project?" "Something with the waterfront development. You know how she gets about high-profile clients." Mike nodded, taking a long pull from his beer. "Speaking of the waterfront, you know that developer guy bought a new BMW from us last week? Chad something. Paid cash for a fully loaded 7 Series. My hand tightened around my beer bottle. "Chad Rains?" "That's him. You know the guy?" "Jenna's mentioned him. Her firm is doing some work for his company." "Must be nice work. Dude dropped 90 grand like it was pocket change. Kept talking about some big score he was expecting, how business was about to get even better." I filed that information away with everything else. Chad was expecting money, a lot of it. And the only project I knew about that could generate that kind of cash was the waterfront development where Jenna's firm was consulting. "He seemed like a decent guy?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Mike shrugged. "Arrogant as hell, but most rich guys are. Kept bragging about his connections, how he knew all the right people in city government. Said he had ways of making sure his projects got approved no matter what." "What kind of ways?" "Didn't say specifically, but he was pretty drunk by the time he finished the paperwork. Mentioned something about having inside information on the zoning committee's decisions before they were announced publicly." inside information. From someone with access to city planning documents and zoning proposals. Someone like an architect who consulted on municipal development projects. I bought Mike another round and let him talk about football while I processed what I'd learned. Chad wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was using her professional access to gain an unfair advantage in his business dealings. That made this about more than just betrayal. It made it about fraud. When I got home, Jenna was already in bed, reading a thick folder of documents with the city planning department's logo on the cover. She looked up when I entered the bedroom, quickly closing the folder. "How was Mike?" "Fine. Same old stories about difficult customers and unreasonable sales quotas. You should see him more often. It's good for you to get out of the house." I started getting ready for bed, watching her in the mirror as I brushed my teeth. She'd reopened the folder and was making notes in the margins with a red pen, her face focused and serious. "Important project?" I asked. "Just reviewing some zoning requirements, nothing exciting." But it was exciting to someone, exciting enough to pay cash for a $90,000 car, exciting enough to risk everything for inside information. I set my phone to record audio and placed it on my nightstand, then got into bed next to my wife. She was still reading, still making notes, still lying to me about what she was doing and why it mattered. "Good night," I said, turning off my bedside lamp. "Good night," she replied, not looking up from her work. I lay in the dark, listening to the sound of her pen scratching across paper, and planned my next move. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the city planning department's public records database. 3 months of permit applications, zoning variance requests, and environmental impact studies painted a clear picture of what Chad and Jenna were really up to. Chad's company had submitted bids for 4 major development projects in the past 6 months. All 4 bids had been perfectly tailored to meet the specific requirements that weren't published until after the bidding deadlines. Someone with advance access to the evaluation criteria was feeding him information. I sat in the public library, using their computers to avoid leaving digital footprints on my home network, and cross-referenced the dates of Chad's Thursday night visits with the timing of his permit applications. The correlation was perfect. Every visit preceded a major filing by exactly 3 days. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." It was Thursday. Of course it was. I drove home and parked in my usual spot, then walked 3 blocks to where I'd started leaving my truck on surveillance nights. The routine had become automatic. Laptop, wireless hotspot, encrypted connection to my security system, and a thermos of coffee that would keep me alert for however long this took. Chad arrived at 7:25, 3 minutes early. The new cameras caught him checking his watch as he walked to my front door, and I realized he was nervous about something. His usual confident stride was replaced by quick, jerky movements, and he kept looking over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. Jenna arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a briefcase I'd never seen before. She moved quickly from her car to the house, and the audio pickups caught her locking the door behind her with more force than necessary. "We need to talk," she said as soon as she was inside. "What's wrong?" Chad was already pouring wine, but his hands were shaking slightly. "The Morrison project. Ryland's been asking questions about my work schedule. He wanted to know why I'm meeting with West Coast clients so often." I leaned forward in my truck seat, turning up the audio feed. This was the first time they'd mentioned me directly in weeks. "What did you tell him?" "The usual story about local representatives, but he didn't seem convinced. He's been different lately, more attentive, like he's watching me." "You think he knows something?" Jenna set down her briefcase and opened it, pulling out the same city planning documents I'd seen her reading in bed. "I don't know, but we need to be more careful. The waterfront project is too important to risk." "How much more careful?" "Maybe we should take a break, just until the zoning committee makes their final decision." Chad moved closer to her, and the camera angle caught his face clearly. He was angry, the kind of controlled anger that came from having important plans threatened by inconvenient realities. A break? Do you understand how much money we're talking about? The preliminary approval alone will triple my property values. I understand the stakes, but if Rylan gets suspicious and starts digging into my work files, we're both finished. I could lose my license, and you could face fraud charges. Your husband is a construction worker. He's not going to figure out municipal zoning fraud. The casual dismissal in Chad's voice made my jaw clench. He thought I was too stupid to understand what they were doing, too simple to recognize the evidence that was sitting right in front of me. That assumption was going to cost him. Rylan's smarter than you think, Jenna said, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something that might have been gratitude. He notices details. It's what makes him good at his job. Then we make sure there are no details for him to notice. Chad pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like a calendar app. The committee meets next Thursday to finalize the waterfront zoning changes. After that, it won't matter what your husband suspects. The permits will be approved, the property values will jump, and I'll have enough money to handle any problems that come up. What kind of problems? The kind that get solved with expensive lawyers and strategic donations to the right political campaigns. Jenna was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents spread across my coffee table. This has gotten bigger than I expected. Cold feet? Practical concerns. If this goes wrong, I lose everything. My career, my reputation, my marriage. Your marriage? Chad laughed, the sound sharp and ugly through the audio feed. When's the last time your husband made you feel alive? When's the last time he challenged you intellectually or supported your professional ambitions? I watched my wife's face on the high-definition camera feed, waiting for her to defend me, to tell Chad that he didn't understand our relationship or our history together. Instead, she nodded slowly. You're right. Rylan and we've been drifting apart for years. Different goals, different priorities. Different leagues, Chad added. You're destined for bigger things than a construction worker's wife. They moved closer together on my couch, and I reached for the laptop to close the feed. I'd seen enough affairs to last a lifetime. But then Jenna spoke again, and her words stopped me cold. After the waterfront project is approved, I want to file for divorce. Seriously? I've been thinking about it for months. This just confirms that I'm ready to move on. Chad smiled, the expression predatory in the camera's infrared glow. What about the house? Community property laws in this state are pretty generous to wives. The house is in both our names, but I've been documenting Rylan's gambling problem for the past year. Small bets, nothing dramatic, but enough to establish a pattern of financial irresponsibility. My hands froze over the laptop keyboard. Gambling problem? I'd never placed a bet in my life except for the occasional office football pool. Smart thinking. What kind of documentation? Receipts, bank withdrawals, credit card charges at places that could be interpreted as gambling establishments. Nothing that would hold up under serious scrutiny, but enough to support a narrative during divorce proceedings. I scrolled back through my security footage, looking for any evidence of Jenna planting false documentation in my personal files. There, 2 weeks ago, while I was at work, she'd spent an hour in my home office, going through my desk drawers and filing cabinet. She'd been planning this divorce for months, building a case against me while sharing my bed and spending my money on wine for her lover. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I almost felt impressed by the scope of it. Almost. I closed the laptop and drove home, parking in my usual spot just as Chad's BMW was pulling out of my driveway. The house was dark except for the bedroom window, where I could see Jenna's silhouette moving around, probably getting ready for bed after her long evening of planning my destruction. I sat in my truck for a few minutes, organizing my thoughts and reviewing my options. The smart play would be to confront her immediately, demand explanations, threaten to expose the fraud scheme unless she ended the affair and agreed to marriage counseling. But smart wasn't what I was feeling. What I was feeling was something much colder and more patient. They thought I was too stupid to figure out their scheme. They thought I was too simple to fight back effectively. They thought they could destroy my marriage, steal my house, and ruin my reputation without consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the weekend preparing, not the kind of preparation that involved lawyers or private investigators, the kind that involved construction skills, technical knowledge, and the patience I'd learned from 20 years of building things that had to last. The first step was documentation. I copied all the surveillance footage to multiple encrypted drives, then had the files notarized and time-stamped by a public notary who specialized in digital evidence. The chain of custody was clean, the metadata was intact, and the audio quality was clear enough to use in court. The second step was research. Chad's business dealings weren't as private as he thought. Corporate filings, property records, and loan documents painted a picture of a man who was leveraged to the limit, betting everything on the waterfront development project. If that deal fell through, his company would collapse within 6 months. The third step was timing. The city planning committee met every Thursday at 4 p.m. in the municipal building downtown. Their meetings were public record, but the preliminary discussions happened in closed session beforehand. If I wanted to maximize impact, I needed to move before Thursday's final vote. On Monday morning, I took a personal day from the construction site and drove to the offices of the Harbor Light, our local newspaper. The editor was a woman named Patricia Walsh, who'd built her reputation on investigating municipal corruption and exposing conflicts of interest among city officials. "Mr. Ventor," she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her cluttered desk. "What can I do for you?" "I have information about fraud in the city planning process. Specifically, someone with access to confidential zoning documents is sharing that information with developers before public hearings." Her expression sharpened with interest. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" I handed her a flash drive containing selected portions of my surveillance footage. The parts that showed Jenna and Chad discussing the waterfront project and the timing of permit applications. I'd edited out the personal content, focusing only on the professional misconduct. "This is from last Thursday night," I said. "The woman is Jenna Ventor, an architect with Morrison and Associates. The man is Chad Rains, who owns Rains Development Group. They're discussing confidential information about this Thursday's zoning committee meeting." Patricia plugged the drive into her computer and watched the clips with the focused attention of someone who recognized a major story when she saw one. When the audio reached the part about Chad's advanced knowledge of committee decisions, she paused the playback. "How did you obtain this footage?" "Security cameras in my home. Jenna Ventor is my wife." She looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional excitement. "Mr. Ventor, this is going to be a very big story. Are you prepared for the attention that comes with that?" "I'm prepared for whatever happens. The paper will need to verify the authenticity of these files and get statements from the other parties involved. We'll also need to coordinate with the district attorney's office if there's evidence of criminal fraud." "I understand. How long before publication?" "If everything checks out, we can run the story in Wednesday's edition. That gives the committee time to postpone Thursday's vote if necessary." I left the newspaper office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The wheels were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. On Tuesday, I installed one final upgrade to my security system, a live streaming feature that would broadcast everything happening in my house to a private web server. If Chad and Jenna tried to destroy evidence or coordinate their stories, I'd have real-time documentation of their efforts. Tuesday night was quiet. Jenna worked late at the office, legitimately this time, according to the GPS tracker I'd discreetly placed on her car. She came home exhausted and distracted, barely speaking during dinner, except to mention that she had another late meeting on Thursday. "The Peterson Group again?" I asked. "Different client. The waterfront project is reaching a critical phase." "Sounds stressful." "It is, but after this week things should settle down considerably. I nodded and went back to my dinner, hiding my smile behind a forkful of mashed potatoes. Wednesday morning, the Harbor Light hit the newsstands with a front-page headline, "City Planning Fraud Alleged. Secret recordings show developer receiving inside information." My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Reporters, city officials, and lawyers all wanted to talk to me about the story and the evidence I'd provided. I referred them all to Patricia Walsh and went to work as usual, spending the day installing drywall and pretending I didn't know that my wife's world was collapsing. Jenna called at lunch, her voice tight with panic. "Rylan, I need to come home. There's been a problem at work." "What kind of problem?" "Someone leaked confidential information to the press. The whole waterfront project is under investigation." "That sounds serious. Do you think you'll lose your job?" A long pause. "I don't know. Maybe. The partners are reviewing everyone who had access to the planning documents. I'm sure it'll work out. You're good at what you do." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll be home around 6. We need to talk." I spent the afternoon finishing my workday and preparing for what would probably be our last conversation as husband and wife. The live stream was active, the backup recordings were running, and the legal documents I'd prepared were waiting in my desk drawer. At 5:45, I was sitting in my living room when Jenna's car pulled into the driveway. She walked into the house like she was approaching a crime scene, her face pale and her hands shaking. "The security cameras," she said without preamble. "How long have they been recording?" "About 2 months. Why?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her realize that I knew everything. The affair, the fraud, the divorce planning, all of it. Her shoulders sagged as the weight of discovery settled over her. "How much did you see?" "All of it, Jenna. Every Thursday night, every lie, every plan to destroy my life and steal my house." She sat down heavily on the couch where she'd spent so many evenings with Chad, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I can explain," she said. "I'm sure you can. You're very creative when it comes to explanations. The affair, it wasn't supposed to happen. It just developed over time, working together on the project. And the fraud?" Her face went even paler. "What fraud?" I pulled out my laptop and showed her the edited footage I'd given to the newspaper. Her face crumpled as she watched herself discussing confidential city planning information with Chad. "Oh God. Rylan, you have to understand, it wasn't supposed to go this far." "How far was it supposed to go? Just the affair, or were you planning to frame me for gambling addiction either way?" She looked genuinely surprised. "You know about that too?" "I know about everything. The fake receipts, the planted evidence, the divorce timeline. Very thorough planning." Jenna started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and fear. She was crying because she'd been caught, not because she was sorry. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to pack your things and leave. Tonight. The divorce papers are already filed, and the fraud evidence has been turned over to the district attorney. Your lawyer can contact my lawyer to discuss property division. The house will be sold, and the proceeds will be divided according to what the court decides is fair. Given the circumstances, I don't think your gambling addiction claims are going to carry much weight." She stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You planned this whole thing. I documented your choices and let the consequences follow naturally. There's a difference. Chad's company will be ruined. He could go to prison. That's what happens when you commit fraud. Actions have consequences." She looked around the living room one last time, her gaze lingering on the wine rack and the couch and the family photos that would need to be divided up by lawyers and mediators. "I never meant for it to end like this," she said. "Yes, you did. You just meant for it to end with me being the one who got destroyed." Jenna went upstairs to pack, and I sat in my living room, watching the sun set through the windows I'd installed myself in the house I'd worked so hard to afford. Tomorrow, Chad would probably be arrested. Next week, Jenna would probably lose her professional license. Next month, I'd probably be living in a smaller place, starting over at 38 with nothing but my tools and my skills and the satisfaction of knowing that I'd fought back. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Mike. "Saw the newspaper. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than I've been in months." And for the first time since this whole mess started, that was actually true. The motion sensors detected Jenna leaving the house at 9:47 p.m., her car loaded with suitcases and boxes. The system would keep recording, but there wouldn't be much to see now except an empty house and a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge was simply making sure the truth came to light. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving, and settled in to watch the late news, where the lead story was about municipal corruption and the arrest of a prominent local developer. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, except for the sound of waves against the harbor seawall, the same sound that had convinced Jenna this was the perfect place to build our life together. She'd been right about the location. She'd just been wrong about who that life would belong to.